Okay, so today we're going to be working with the conic sections, and we're going to start off with just an overview of what they all are. So the conic section we're going to work with today is going to be the circle. Conic sections are formed by having this double right cone. So it looks like this to start with. If we go and put a plane parallel to the base of the cone, we're going to get a circle if that intersection of that plane and that cone that's open inside. And that's what we're going to discuss today. Now, there are other conic sections that we can actually get. If we come in at an angle like this with the plane, then we can get a shape called an ellipse. Ellipses are going to be what is formed when we have a planet that is orbiting something. They follow an elliptical pattern. Then we'll get into hyperbolas. Hyperbolas are when we come in with a plane perpendicular to that base. We get these two shapes together that are called a hyperbola. These are used when we're creating telescopes and antennas. And then if we come in at an angle like this, where we miss the top cone and hit the bottom cone, then we're going to get this one singular shape that's called a parabola. And these are used anytime we throw an object in the air like that, it's going to follow the path of a parabola. All right, so we're going to start off by reviewing the distance formula. Do you guys remember the distance formula from geometry? No? Okay, here's what it says. The distance between two objects is going to be equal to the square root of, I should say the distance between 2 points. We have to find the difference in the x's, so we have to subtract the x's and square it, and then we have to add the difference in the y values and square it. That's how we find the distance between 2 points. We subtract these, square it, subtract the y's, square it, add those values, and take the square root. It's really just the Pythagorean theorem is all it is. And I'll show you that here in a minute. Midpoint. I think most of you learned the midpoint formula last year. It's just the average of the x's and the average of the y's. I like to write it a little differently than what you probably saw it last year. To find the coordinate of the x part of the midpoint, we add up the x's and we divide by 2. That's how we always find the middle of two numbers. If we want to find the coordinate of the y value of the midpoint, and I like to use this notation, midpoint sub y means y value of midpoint. What do we do then? Add up the y's and then do what? Divide by 2, right? So it's going to be the average there. So if I want to find the coordinates of the x value for the midpoint, you do that. Y is this. All right, let's look at an example now. So we're going to find the distance and the midpoint for right here, what we're given. Okay, so I'm going to draw a picture here of it. And I think I'm going to have to go by 2's to fit on the 8. So I'm going to go 2, 4, 6, 8. And then 7, I'm going to go 2, 4, 6, 7 is going to be right there. There's my first point. My other point is over 3. So 2, 3 is going to be right there. And then 5 is going to go 2, 4, 5, like that. So I'm trying to find how far apart these are. What I could really do instead of using the distance formula is just think of this as a right triangle. Drop this down here. How far is it between these x's? This point is at 8, 7. This point is at 3, negative 5. How far is it from 3 to 8? From 3 to 8, how far would this, what would be the length of this from 3 to 8? 5. I'm creating a right triangle right here. How far is it from negative 5 up to 7? How far apart is it from negative 5 up to 7? 12, okay? Anybody know what the hypotenuse would have to be here? 5, 12, 13, yeah. Now, I could find that distance by using my formula. The distance formula says it's the square root of the difference in the x's squared plus the difference in the y's squared. Plugging in my values, I'm going to do my first x minus my second x squared plus my first y minus my second y squared. Well, that's going to give me 5 squared is 25. 7 plus 5 squared is 12 squared. So now I'm going to have 25 plus 144. What is that? What's 25 plus 144? 169. And what's that square root? 13. Wasn't it easier to think of that as being a right triangle than it was to go through that distance formula? So I use that method a lot. I just think, what is the difference there? 5, square it. If I had to use Pythagorean theorem, I would, but if I can just figure it out with the triples, I would do so. All right, to find my midpoint now, to find the midpoint for the x, I have to add up the x's and divide by 2. So 8 plus 3 is 11, divided by 2 is 5.5. To find the y value coordinate for the midpoint, I have to add 7 and -5 and divide by 2. That's 2 divided by 2, and so that's going to be 1. So that midpoint should be at 5.5, comma 1. So let's see if that seems right. Here's 2, 4, 5.5, and then up 1. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Doesn't that look like it's in the middle of those 2 points? Okay, so we're just using a diagram to kind of help us visually understand that these formulas work. All right, next. What about if we're given a segment, we're told that one of the endpoints is at 2, -5, and then they tell us what the midpoint is. All right, this is a little tougher. Let's see. I think I can get this on if I just go by ones even. So they're telling me the endpoint is 2, -5, and the other midpoint is at -2, 1. So here's my midpoint, here's my endpoint. I'm trying to figure out what's the other endpoint. Which direction is that other endpoint? Is it going to be below this endpoint? Is it going to be up above and to the left of the midpoint? Can you see how the other endpoint would have to be up here somewhere, right? Well, the reason I gave you that other form of the formula that you're not used to is because of problems like this, which are always on the ACTs. The midpoint x value is x1 plus x2 divided by 2. Well, this is the midpoint's x value, and this is the midpoint's y value. This value is the first x that I'm given, and this is the first y that I'm given. So now I can just plug it in. What's my midpoint's x value? Looking right here, -2, right? I'm going to sub in x sub 1, which is the endpoint of the x coordinate of the endpoint. So that's going to be 2 plus. Do I know what that second point is yet? No. So I'm just going to call that, I'll just call it x instead of x sub 2, and then divide it by 2. Do you guys know how to solve a problem like that? How can we undo divided by 2? Can I just cancel out those 2's? No, because that's a term. I can't do that. So I'm going to multiply this by 2 and multiply this by 2. So -4 equals, those cancel, 2 plus x. So what's the x value going to be then? Subtract the 2 over. -6. So my other endpoint is going to be at -6. Okay. And now I have to find my y sub 2. So using my formula, I know m sub y has to equal those y's added together and divided by 2. Well, my y value is 1 on my midpoint. My first y is -5. I don't know the second one, divided by 2. Multiply both sides by 2. Those cancel, and I get 1 times 2 is 2 equals -5 plus y sub 2. Add 5. And I get that my second endpoint's y value should be 7. Let's see if that looks reasonable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Does that look about right? Yeah. So you should use some common sense when you're doing these problems. Like if you do a little sketch and it doesn't look right, if that endpoint had been over here, you'd be like, something's wrong there, right? Okay. Circles, standard graphing form is this. Did you guys see this last year in geometry? Basic form for a circle. X minus h, quantity squared, plus y minus k, quantity squared, equals r squared. The center is going to be hk, and the radius is going to be the square root of this number. All right, we're going to start off with some easy problems here. This is the center. So what's this -3? Is that h or k? Matching it up, the center is hk. So what's -3? H or k? H. What's 7 going to be then? K. And here's our radius. So I'm going to plug that into my basic graphing form for a circle. I'm going to do x minus -3 squared plus, plugging in, y minus, plug in k, 7 squared equals, and then I have to square my radius, which what is 5 squared? 25. And now we're just going to simplify it. We have minus a negative. That's going to become x plus 3. And that's the equation of the circle that's going to have those qualities right there. The center will be at -3, 7. This is the shift to the left 3. That's going to go up 7. And the radius is always the square root of that. All right. You guys try this one now. See if you can figure it out. Plug it into that formula. And I'm just going to show you how this would look if I use Desmos to check it. Here's the answer I got. So I got this. And can you see how this does have a center at -2, -6? Right there would be the center. Did you guys get the 28 right there? Did you square the 2 radical 7 right? Good job. Okay. All right. Now we're going in the other direction. So now we're starting with the equation and we want to find the center and we want to find the radius and we want to find 4 points on the circle. Madeline, can you tell me what the center would be? 1, -2 is correct. So I'm going to plot that point, 1, -2. Sammy, what's the radius? So to find 4 points on the circle, what would I do? I add 4 in all directions, right? I'm going to go to the right 4. I'm going to go to the left 4. I'm going to go up 4. And I'm going to go down 4. And then I can graph the circle perfectly. And I would love you to be able to figure out those 4 points without having to look at the graph. Okay, so I went to the right 4. That means I'm going to add 4 to 1. So 5, -2. Then I went to the left 4. So that means I'm going to subtract 4 from 1. That's -3, -2. Y doesn't change when I move to the right and to the left. Y stays the same. What about when I go up and down? What's going to stay the same? The X. So X stays the same, and I went up 4 to 2. X stays the same, and I went down 4 to -6. Those would be 4 points that lie on the circle. Okay, good. All right, last couple things here. Next, it says that we want to complete the square to get the circle into standard form. Okay, we did completing the square earlier in the year, but it's been a while. So I'm going to put my x's together. Here's a next term, here's a next term. They go together. Here's a y term. Leave some space here, guys. Put your y squared, put your other y term, leave some space, and then you have to take the constant over to the other side. So what's it going to become if I take it to the other side? Positive 11, good. Does anybody remember what we do to make this a perfect square trinomial? It has to do with this and taking half of it and then doing something. Here's what you have to do, guys. You have to take half of b and then square it. That's the key. Half of b and square it. B is the coefficient of this term. So what's half of -14? -7. Square it. What's any number squared is going to be turning into a positive, right? So 7 squared is 49. I'm going to add 49 here to make this a perfect square trinomial. Well, if I'm going to just add 49 to this left side, I have to add 49 to the right side too to keep it equal to with what I started with. Okay? Here's another b value. B is the coefficient of the non-squared term. What am I going to add to the left side if I take half and square it? Half of 4 is 2, square it is 4. So I'm going to add 4 to the left side. And if I'm going to add 4 there, I have to add 4 here. I have to do that to both sides to keep it equal. See how I added 49 to the left and the right, added 4 here and here. Everything else is just what I started with. Now, I now want to factor this. It has to go down into a binomial squared. Anybody think they know what that factors down into? What do you think, Natalie? Good. That's x. Use the first sign and the square root. So if I multiplied out x minus 7 times x minus 7, that's what it's equal to. All right. What about this? Right here. Do we know what that's going to factor down into? Alex, what do you think? Right, y plus 2 quantity squared is that. Okay, now I'm going to add all of these over here. So 11 and 49 is 60 plus 4 is 64. Now you should know the center and the radius. Think about it. The center and the radius. Oriana, you know what it is? Center. Good. And you know the radius? 8. Okay. And then I could put that into Desmos if I wanted to check it. Putting this in the graphing calculator is really difficult because you have to solve it for y. So I'd have to like subtract this over, take the square root, subtract 2. It'd be really tedious to do. All right, guys, I want you to try B on your own. I'm not going to talk you through it. I'm going to be kind of working it up here if you get stuck, but see how much you can do on your own. They're kind of slow. Some of you able to get it? Good job. Okay, if not, go back later and try it again. We took half of this, squared it, added it, half of that squared, added it. Also had to put it over here. Had to do that computation, that was 25. Then it goes the square root, first sign, square root, first sign, square root. And this is equivalent to that. This is equivalent to that. Okay? All right, guys, just a couple more here. Find the equation of the circle in standard form with this center and containing this point. Okay, I'm going to go through this a little quicker now. They're giving me the center, so I know it's going to have to go x minus 3 squared plus y plus 2 squared has to equal r squared. The problem is I don't know what r is. I do know hk because they told me the center. So what I have to do now is plug this in for x and y because that's going to allow me to figure out r. This is an x, this is a y. So I'm going to plug this in for x. I'm going to plug -6 in for r, or y, sorry. So 2 squared is 4. -4 squared is 16. And that's going to tell me what my r squared is. I really don't even care what r is. I care more about what r squared is. Because remember how this is my formula right here? I just need to know r squared. So now I've got it. Okay? My formula is right here. I knew h, I knew k, and now I just found r squared, and that's what I needed to finish the equation. To have the equation, we need to know h, k, and r squared. Questions? All right. Write the equation of a circle in standard form, which is what we've been doing, with center of 4, -2, and tangent to the x-axis. All right, you're going to have to make a little sketch here. 4, -2. That's our center. What does tangent mean from geometry? It means that the circle touches it at exactly 1 point. 1 point. So we want to be tangent to this x-axis. So that means the circle has to look like this. How is that a helpful piece of information, knowing that it's tangent right there at the x-axis, Alex? It's telling us the radius, isn't it? Because how far is it from this point to that x-axis? 2. So we know the radius has to be 2. And now we're good to go into our formula. Just writing that formula one more time. You don't have to write it over and over if you've got it down. And I just plug in my h and my k. And there we go. Okay? And the last thing you have is a challenge. If you're up for that challenge, you can try to figure this out on your own. Okay? I'm not going to do it and it's not going to be in the notes, but I'd love for some of you to try it and then check with me later. Okay? All right, guys, that's it. Just make sure you know that formula. You need to do the worksheet. It's called CS1.